age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? If someone could give me a shout out in the chat, that would be great. I have a little bit of a confession to make. I had two guests lined up for tonight, and we were going to talk about their indie comics. And Sage says, "How you doing, RJ? How you doing, Sarge? Is it Sarge?" Michael says, "Can hear you. Great." So I had two guests lined up. Better put my glasses on. Two guests lined up, and both of them had to make other appointments. One of them was going to a Comic-Con. The other one was on another stream that was interfering with this one. So I decided to just do a quick live stream, and we're going to probably have Nick X and John coming on here soon enough. John, I'm sure, is probably running over his time. He has a live stream with Cecil right now, and I forgot to send Nick the link until just a couple of moments before we went live. So, in case you're wondering, Nick X is the artist for Crom the Destroyer. I'll put some of Nick's stuff up in the background so you know who Nick is, and then I'll get to the chat. Let's see. Let's see if I can put up something without any sound. Here, okay. This is Nick's stuff in the background. Here we go. So, well, actually, that's Jim O'Reilly there, but we'll show a little bit of Nick's stuff. So, we're just going to talk my books and the new stuff that's coming up, and John's book, which he went live with last week, and I think his goal was $1,000, and he has some very reasonable goals set for his book, and he's already hit 3,000. I think it's $3,500. So he's doing well. So this is Nick's stuff in the background, in case you're wondering. John's Heroic Tales book. The link for that is in the description, in case you're wondering. I have already ordered my copy. He went live on Michael Bancroft's show, so I ordered it, and within the hour, he's actually funded within the hour of Michael Bancroft's show, which, he had a very low goal, but at the same time, John was planning to make it if he hit that $1,000 mark. And, John's stuff looks great. He has Renzo working with him as well. So check that out if you can. And let's see, I'll see if I can keep up with the chat tonight, just because, again, I don't know if John is going to make it or if Nick is going to make it. Both of them I pulled out on short notice. Otherwise, we're going to be talking a lot about indie comics. Let's see. We'll give a shout out to who is in the chat here. Sarge is here. How you doing? Michael is here. Sarge was the first one here. Give me a little bit of a nudge saying it's time, RJ. Yeah, I was still sending links at that time. Sound Engraver is here. How you doing, Sound Engraver? As I always say, go out and check out Sound Engraver's channel. Click on her icon, left click on it, and open up her YouTube channel and go give it a listen to. Manny is here. How you doing? Vaz is here. Tony is here. How's everybody doing? Junkie? Junk something. Looks like a Japanese symbol, junk. Junk, what is that symbol at the end of junk? I just want to know. Just out of curiosity. How you doing? Let's see. Scrolling down. Sorry. Let's see. Yes. So the reason why I wanted to talk to Nick and show you some of his art, hopefully he'll show you some of the new art, is because I didn't realize I got so many things going on at one time that I didn't realize that Nick was so far ahead of getting Crom the Destroyer done. He's already done of chapter 2. He asked me for the pages for chapter 3, and I gave him the first of the pages. I don't like to give the artist too many pages at once, just because things can change drastically. Junk says purple. So purple junk. Yeah, purple junk. I'm just going to leave that where it is. What in the world is it, Japanese? I'm sorry. Junk is just showing me in the chat here. Murasaki. Murasaki? My pronunciation for or English is bad enough. I can't imagine what it sounds like for Japanese. But as I was saying, right, Nick has a Dropbox where he sends me stuff, and I completely forgot to check the Dropbox for the longest time, not realizing that he had done all 23 pages of chapter 2 already. And this afternoon, I just took a look, and he has them all lettered and everything. It is just something to behold. It's spectacular. Crom the Destroyer, link for it is in the description, by the way. Crom the Destroyer just looks amazing. I mean, I know I'm the one who wrote it and it's my campaign and everything, but still it looks just amazing. Let's for anyone who hasn't seen, the campaign itself, I will just pull it up in the background here for 1 second. All right, so let's see if I can make that just a little bigger for everybody. How in the world? Oh, full screen. Here we go. All right. So, Crom the Destroyer. That's where the trailer that you watched the first comes from, right there. And with Crom the Destroyer, there is Nick's work right there on the cover. And this is Jim O'Reilly's pages, inked by Mike Kostovich, by the way, for the first chapter. You can read the first 11 pages of Crom the Destroyer on the Indiegogo site, by the way. The lettering is temporary for now, just in case you're wondering. And there's a couple of the perks. Here's a couple of stuff from Jim. Oversized cards that you can get. Page 2, oversized cards of the Demon Woman. Scrolling down, page 3, we have a poster that's available. It's Henry, I think Martinez did this poster. He used to work for Marvel. He did Ghost Rider for a little while during the 1990s. I got in touch with him through Don Chin. Great guy, Don Chin. I always have to shout out Don. Let's see, scrolling down, show you what else. That's page 4. And here we have, the one of the posters from Luke. This is also available as part of the Morning Light standalone story that you can get with the campaign, which is a story written by me, which is a text story, which happens during one of the fallow periods of the Crom the Destroyer. Just to say, because there is a tiny little bit of we'll say, not too long, but there's a bit of a time gap, a little bit between chapter 2 and chapter 3, not a whole lot. But during that time, nothing in the story happens, but this extra story happens. So when you're reading Crom the Destroyer, if you've read it, or when you read it, when you get it, when it's done, I have a note at the end of one of the panels, bottom of one of the panels, saying, read Morning Light here. And there's another story that I'm inserting into this because originally the Morning Light perk only had one story. Now there's going to be 2, an extra one that is what's the name of it? Because I got too many. I got a bunch of other stories right now. There's another one added to it. Anyways, let's see. That's page 6, page 5. Again, there's Luke's other part of the Morning Light story, which he has 2 illustrations in that story. So they will be basically page-sized illustrations. But at the same time, you can get it as a poster. Page 7, beautiful art by Jim and Mike. There is the very cheap poster of, I think it's $3. Jim O'Reilly's Join the King's Army Today. Scrolling down, page 7, and there is the first page of the text for the Morning Light story, and then we get the black and white stuff because you can order Crom the Destroyer both as a comic and as an oversized magazine black and white story, so that it shows the black and white. You can see the uninked pages, which is going to be an artist rendition of what these pages are without color, without inking. So anyways, again, there's the second page of Morning Light. Page, what are we on now? Page 9. Again, that's pure Jim O'Reilly there. Page 10 and page 11. Am I not missing anything? Nope. And then we get down to, here's some of Nick's stuff in case you haven't seen it before, or I guess you've seen some of this just in the last couple of minutes because I put it up. There's the Demon Woman done by Nick at the because Nick does chapter 2. Let's see. I should go back to, let me see, StreamYard. Let's see. Nope, no one is waiting in the wings. So we'll keep on going here. There's a couple other, there's one from Nick. Again, this is chapter 2, Nick's inking. Nick's penciling for chapter 2. And this is a beautiful panel. I'm just, with the cauldron here in the middle and the demon woman, and you can only see part of her in the panel, and King, the main character, in the background on the floor. Nick just knocks this out of the park. And trust me, I just went from page 1 to page 23, reading the entire thing lettered of chapter 2. Nick knocks it out of the park. I mean, this book is going to be amazing. And let's just say I hope my pros keep up with this beautiful art that both of these artists have produced for this book. But anyway, I want to geek out about it so much that this is part of what I wanted to do today. But besides that, let's take this down, remove from stage, and let's see. Here's the man himself. How you doing, Nick? We've just been talking about your art, talking about those 23 pages for chapter 2 that I just read today. Amazing stuff. I must say, amazing.
Oh, thank you, sir. What were you? Oh, okay, now I see. I didn't realize that you'd put some of this stuff, some of my stuff, on the campaign page there. Is that what you're flipping through? It was just the campaign page?
Yeah, just right now I was flipping through the campaign page. But if you wanted to show some of the new stuff, you can share screen with me, and that'd be fine. So we're waiting on John a little bit, just because
he's over at Cecil's stream. Yeah. That's why I'm late, because I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess if John's here, RJ hasn't started. And then I fired up Twitter, and it's like, no, you're going, and I'm like, oh, I better get in there right now, because I don't know when John's gonna actually show up.
I didn't even realize that Cecil still had a channel, quite honestly.
Yeah. He's got 437 people in there watching. So
holy Moses, really?
Yeah,
well, John's going to get a good boost then.
Yeah, hopefully. So I've got like a couple things. So I'll just make sure that I'm showing some blanks. I don't know, like, if we want to, like, what all we want to show. I don't really want to give away too much either, right? Let me see. I'll fire up. This is. I'm looking for pages that open up like dramatic questions. Those are always fun because you can never really know kind of how that's gonna. Yeah, we can't show that page because that one's a killer page, story wise. And let's see. I'll find. No, don't want to show that one either. No, can't show that one. See, like a lot of the pages that I've done now are all like right at the climax, right? So it's just the height of all action, the height of all story. Yeah, dramatic questions are getting closed. They're collapsing in on each other. It's pretty awesome. This one's pretty fun. Let's show this one. I can always show the classic. Like this one here is pretty classic too. So here, I'll show these ones. I think this will be fun. So present, share screen, and the entire screen will go with that. There.
This is the page, actually, I was thinking of, the one with Mondrian and the demon woman here at the bottom. It's one of the beautiful pages right there. Yes, that you did that amazingly. That's one of the things. And this is the middle one is the one that I'm showing a lot on Twitter. It's the huge battle at the top. So these are some of the new pages. In case you are follow me on Twitter, you might have seen some of these. Otherwise, I don't show these pages too much, but beautiful stuff from Nick, I have to say. And we have already started. Have you started on chapter 3? I sent you the script for the first couple of pages. Just wondering.
I haven't started. I was going to lay out all 8 pages. And then kind of get your take on them and see like what you thought.
Because it is a bit of a, yes, we'll just, without giving away too much of the story, there is a shift from chapter 2 to chapter 3 that you're going to have to, I suppose, get into a different feel of what you're going for art within that chapter.
Yeah, I noticed you had like sort of breaking with tradition of so some of the and I don't know if you probably did notice, RJ, but when you're writing the script, obviously we've got sort of more of a classic feel, which is like, you know, the 3x3 or you know, sort of standard kind of like square panels. Now obviously it's modern day, so we've got to kind of like be judicious in sort of how we approach that. So when I would use sort of a standard paneling. But then anytime the story asked for it, obviously I would start to bring in something with a little bit more, you know, energy. So, you know, establishing shots might get a slight, like up here at the top. This panel right here obviously requires a little bit more attention, that kind of thing. But then you'll notice, like, as we move into the climax, I started borrowing from one of my favorite artists, which is Alan Davis. And especially if you read, like, I think it's like Uncanny X-Men 444, 45, 46, something like that, 47 maybe even. When you read his pages, you'll see that he's using very, you know, square, proper panels as he's telling the story. But then when we get into the climax, when the action really starts to take off, the panels start to skew, the panels start to go all sorts of directions. The chaos is, you know, raised, the stakes are raised, everything just kind of goes crazy. And it just comes into like this final kind of moment. And it's just this energy that builds, and it's just all this, like, you know, everything's slanted, the camera, everything's a Dutch angle, everything's off kilter, everything's off balance. All the characters are just under the gun and everything else. And so, you know, you'll notice, like, you know, this starts to pick up here on page 19, you know, page 22, you can see even here, the angles are even picking up even more. I pushed the page down here because I'm kind of hiding a little bit of the story there. But here, you know, like I said, the story is, you know, the action is starting to pick up, but everything's fairly straight. Everything's fairly prim and proper. But then as you get into like the real climax and you build up, things really start to go askew. And so I try to take the paneling, the shape of the panels, and have them help to sort of dictate, if you will, if you can dictate chaos, you know, dictate the chaos that is the climax, and just sort of take that energy. Alan Davis does it so incredibly in Uncanny X-Men. I look at those issues over and over and over again. In fact, I could probably fire up exactly what I'm talking about. We can kind of reminisce in some of great comics. And Alan Davis, I mean, I think at one point I sent you how Alan writes his scripts. And I think you even did an episode where you talked a little bit about Alan Davis. And
yeah, I did. There was, I did a video on Alan Davis's scripts. Which is funny. It's just you're talking about the chaos of this entire thing and the difference between the chaos and the order, which is really interesting because of the very fact that we have the two. There, well, not giving it away too much, that there is basically a sorcerer's battle within chapter 2, but the two sorcerers are very different. One is much more of a demonic entity. The other one is like advanced science in a sword and sorcery kind of world. So you got two different kinds of sorcerers. One is almost a scientific sorcerer, and the other one's a supernatural sorcerer. So the fact that you have chaos bumping up against order within the panels, I think, is apropos, if I use my French correctly.
Yeah. So here's one of the issues of 450. I always love his Nightcrawler. It's just he has so much personality. I just absolutely love Davis's Nightcrawler. But yeah, so here's a lot of action and everything. So you'll see the panels kind of go sideways. Now, this isn't a climax. I want you to take note, because this isn't a climax. It is action, but it's not quite a climax. It's a climax for the scene, but not really, fully. And then we get into, we're just in the danger room. Everything goes back to normal. We're back to square panels, proper panels, and so on, right? And then you see, whenever there's action, he'll start to play with the panel layout to kind of emphasize whatever that action might be. And then we come back to, straight panels. And then as we build, so many ads, as we build into the climax again, straight panels, and the pacing and everything. Alan is so good at storytelling. This is the one thing, like, I like it when he's working with Chris Claremont, but I'm kind of, the later issues of Excalibur, when Alan is actually writing the book himself, because it started off with Chris and Alan, on Excalibur at the beginning, but around issue 40 or something like that, I can't remember exactly when, Alan starts writing it himself. And that was some of the script stuff that I was showing you. It was just, Alan wasn't even writing scripts. He was writing sort of notes for himself. He wouldn't even necessarily write panels. He might write like a beat or a moment, but he wouldn't necessarily number panels. He wouldn't do proper script format, because of course he's the artist. So what he's doing is he's jotting down what he's imagining. I mean, as you do as well, but you have to kind of take an extra step, which is a little bit cumbersome, right? You have to write panel 1, panel 2, when you can just sit there, close your eyes, and just see the scenes, right? And in some cases you wish I'd see the scenes as you see them. And in other cases, you're like, I'd never seen the scene. I'd never, my dream witnessing of the scene was not like how you saw it, how I drew it, kind of thing. And so there's sort of this synergy that goes on there. But with Alan as the writer and the artist, of course, it just comes alive in a very, especially with Excalibur, he puts such an emphasis on personality for these characters that one script that I shared with you is the one where Nightcrawler has, and we'll show it, but Nightcrawler has this relationship in a dream with Megan. And he says, he kind of slips out this oh, Megan, in his dream. And he doesn't realize he's actually saying it aloud. And then, of course, Captain Britain hears this, and he's like, what the hell did you say? What are you talking? This kind of thing. And it's such a great, the way that he emphasizes personality and the way he just gets this idea that Nightcrawler didn't mean offense. But at the same time, what can he do? He has a crush on this woman. She's beautiful. She's innocent. She's just, obviously incredibly gorgeous, all that. But what is he supposed to do? And at the end of the story, he's just like, look, I'm alone. I'm lonely. Do you get that? We're locked up in this tower. It's actually a lighthouse, but and obviously this is a tough situation. And Captain Britain's kind of all right, he kind of calms down about it. But it's just Alan's ability to take what he sees and then illustrate it. He knows the limitations of what the page can and can't do. What he knows what he can do with the characters' faces, their gestures, their personality, what he can get across. And so when he's coming at a page, when he's looking at in his mind's eye, how this could play out on the page. He has a very nuanced and a very sort of sophisticated language at his disposal, a whole vocabulary, a whole visual vocabulary that he can draw upon that maybe a writer may not have. So it's always interesting whenever I see an artist who is also a fairly decent writer. I mean, Alan Davis isn't like the best writer in the world, but I would say unmatched. He's unmatched when it comes to like the way he gets personality and character and the way he's able to sort of express that. And he knows it too. He knows what his skills are and he plays to that. So he has very character driven stories in Excalibur. I love it. I'm sorry, I'm just gushing about it, but it's incredible to see. But yeah, so as I said, we've got these sort of square panels and we're going to start building up. And here we can start to see that the action is starting to dictate the structure of our storytelling, which is the panels, in part, a large part, right? You remember Snowblind by John Byrne, where it was just all paneling, and he had no artwork in it at all. He just had like text and such. I don't know if you remember that issue.
I don't, not off the top of my head. Is
I
that
think it was Alpha Flight?
Oh yes, it's the one with Alpha Flight on the front. It's an early John Byrne X-Men.
It was snow. I think that issue was called Snowblind, and it was all blank panels. He literally didn't draw anything except blank panels. But the way he took the paneling and the way he laid out those panels was all about storytelling. Even though there was no art in there, it was just an interesting exercise, and it was a pretty bold move. I was surprised that he did something like that. It's pretty ballsy, really.
And it's funny because what you're talking about here, that's some of the stuff that I've covered on different episodes of this podcast or this Wednesday night stuff. Because if you look at Neil Adams stuff, he does the exact same thing, but he does it for pacing. He doesn't do it for action. He does it for pacing. And you can see the same thing at work within Liefeld's stuff as well. But he does it more to slide your vision from panel to panel rather than either of those two for action or for pacing, which is very interesting. And you can use it in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the panel here, you can see, we're using this panel sort of off kilter. We're using a Dutch angle at the same time. We're coming into this panel, and of course, this panel is pointing us to where we start here at the help, and then we're coming down through these characters, and then back around, and so the composition comes into her leg, into this dialogue, into her leg. And then around, of course, he puts this chair in because he doesn't want you leaving the page. He wants you to follow back around and up through into here, into these. You see how these lines bring you into the word balloon, back around, out the page. And her foot actually helps to point you out the page. All of that, I promise you, is not accidental. All those little lines that he's putting in there to direct your eye from character to character, balloon to balloon, moment to moment, even this little chair and everything else to make sure that you're guided in exactly the way he wants you to be guided, that these are not accidental. And I try to do it in my work, but it's an incredibly heavy sort of mental lifting that you have to do in terms of like, how do I get all these elements to work in concert? But yeah, so here.
And that's one of the things too. I don't know if you got to look at the pages for the Rampaging Thor, which is part of the Valiant Heroes, but Mike Gustovich did the pencils for that. And he does this also as well. There's a number of pages where things get heavy that he slides everything to one side. It's like the whole page is slanted. So he is very much, because I was surprised because Mike's an old penciler and inker from early 80s, right? And the fact that he was using this much Dutch angle within the panel layout itself surprised me when I first saw his pages. But again, it's just the development of his style over the years.
Yeah, I've seen I think a couple pages, but I haven't seen that many, to be honest. Yeah, so here's, again, we're coming into the beginning of the story, so everything's going to be established, and then we get right into the action. And so some of the panels are skewed. I absolutely love it. I think it's incredible. The panels are interesting. And other things you're going to see him do is that he's going to group panels. So these two panels are grouped together and overlap this panel here. And then these three panels are grouped together. So what you're getting is a grouping of storytelling units. These two work together. This is a transitional or an interruption of this into the next group, which is this group of three. And you'll see it. Yeah, so this here, and then this is grouped together. And so the way, part of the way that he's communicating the grouping isn't just that they're in line. In this case, it's very easy to see that these are in line, they're grouped together, but it's also the overlap of this panel. All of these panels overlap in the same way. They're on the same plane, right? And so therefore they are grouped together. He does that a lot as well, you'll see. And these two panels are together. This is a transitional moment through dialogue, and then these three panels are together. And like I said, they communicate this block of, or this unit of meaning making. Yeah, grouping together, and then he's using panel border as a transitional into the interruption, which is the introduction of this character here. Now this character, of course, what's Alan doing? He's saying this character is so big that he takes up the entire page. So he takes this panel, it's over half the page, and then at the same time, it's a full page spread, like like all the way to the edges. The art goes. Once again, this is a panel of its own. It's its own unit into this panel here, and then these panels are grouped together. It's just fantastic. This is not Alan. There's one other thing, going back to 44. I'll go to the end of that sequence right here, I think is probably what we want to look at.
It was funny because I was just sharing online part of what I was doing on Twitter. I was sharing the Alan Davis Legion of Superheroes covers, because it's beautiful stuff. I mean, I posted it and I thought to myself, I got to post more Alan Davis. I really do.
Absolutely love his work. Like I said, like for me, it goes to the faces, the expressions, his ability to get personality. You know, a lot of the times I see artists draw things that look really, really cool. And that's great. Like, obviously cool is, you know, I subscribe to cool. I try to get cool in my art as well, but it's sometimes at the expense of connecting with the character. It's just everything's just so cool or too cool. It's kind of like too far removed. You know, I'm never that cool. I could never be that cool. They're too cool that I don't really even get a read, really, you know. Alan doesn't do that. The characters, you know, if he's drawing Kitty has a particular personality, and I feel it in her gesture, in her expression, and everything. All these characters to me feel very real when he draws them.
This is something I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, or more, about a month ago, because what we were just, what I was just talking about with the use of these kinds of panels by Liefeld. I think that he's one of the group of people that use them in the way that's more about graphic design than about storytelling. That's what they were trying to do within the 90s. And it's because there was such an explosion of what you could do with graphic design at that time. And that's why it was new and fresh. And that's what I think. I don't think that those things stand up as well to the test of time, like something like Neil Adams or this stuff here with Alan Davis.
Yeah, let's touch on that a bit. So what you're getting at is graphic design has been with us forever, right? So since we were, you know, putting together magazines with old ink illustrations of like you know, horse and cart, or you have to buy this shovel. They didn't have photographs of that stuff, or it wouldn't reproduce very well in print. So they would hire illustrators to do these beautifully rendered ink drawings. I don't know if you've ever seen them. I've got a tack, like all horse tack, like book like from ages ago, from the 1800s, and it's just all product that they were selling, and they would hire these artists to do these beautiful ink illustrations of them. Graphic design has been with us. So the moment that you put one image beside another image, or type beside an image, or anything like that, that is technically graphic design. But what you're talking about is the advent of desktop publishing. The moment that that got introduced is the moment that everybody and their dog, everybody's nephew in their basement could now be a graphic designer. And what that meant was the training didn't have to be there. The advertising agencies weren't sort of the gatekeepers of, let's say, the talent, or they weren't the ones that sort of made sure that it was only talent that was put out there. So when you look at before the desktop publishing era kind of thing, what you saw was very capable individuals, and graphic design is storytelling. It is storytelling. It might be the simplest story ever, like this is a shovel and it's $2.99. Okay, fine, we get it. But the idea is that you're going from one concept to another concept, and there's meaning making happening. Not necessarily in a narrative, but there is something there. There's sort of a sequence of how you're supposed to take the read, as it were. But when you get this desktop publishing boom, and everybody's got Photoshop, and everybody's got Adobe Illustrator and all that, suddenly you have all these people who are undisciplined. And so they don't understand when they've left, let's say, the graphic design of, selling a product, and they've moved into the graphic design, because this is graphic design. All of this is graphic design. But the graphic design of storytelling or narrative, they don't know that they've moved in they've changed the context of this. Everything's just basically a blur. It's like a writer who doesn't understand that they're writing within a genre. They basically just throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and there's only a few writers that can do that well, Chris Claremont probably being one of them. But most of the time, you have to pick your lane and kind of stay in it. And at that time, desktop publishing just meant anybody could do it, undisciplined, just completely unfettered, and released upon the world as a horrible, horrible plague. Over time, however, from like the 90s into, let's say, the 2000s, so on, these undisciplined individuals started to get kind of identified. And some of the image guys are of that ilk. They got identified as what? As the, undisciplined. Those people who went for the cool factor, the wow factor, but they sacrificed narrative, personality, character for something that looked crazy or cool or whatever it was. And so there was sort of a maturing that had to happen in the general sphere of graphic design. More and more resources were put online in terms of like training people, like online courses and things like that helped people identify. And of course, ridicule is always a wonderful corrective mechanism. And so you would have, like, if you remember back in the day, I'm sure you do, the way web pages used to look, like GeoCity pages and things like that. They were just god awful. They had terrible colors, flashing GIFs everywhere. The internet was pretty crude back in the day, but over time it started to mature. So that's like what you're talking about around the 90s, when desktop publishing had been around a little earlier than that, but it was too expensive and not very many people had it. But the moment that it started getting onto like everybody's PC and everything else, that's when things went really, really crazy. And you saw, especially like around the 80s and the 90s, it's sort of a deconstruction of what used to be proper graphic design back in the day, when they're hiring like top quality illustrators to do, Marlboro illustrations for their ads and magazines and things like that. They moved away from that kind of like elegant, sophisticated typography, and they moved into this like crazy, release the hounds kind of like, chaos that you saw during the 80s and the 90s. And that's what you're talking about. And then, like I said, there was a bit of a corrective sort of thing that happened as it started to mature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And the thing was that I ran into this just a couple of months ago. It was around Christmas. So it was at the family home, and they still had the old encyclopedias there, right? And I was flipping through the old encyclopedias, and they were like from the late 80s, early 90s. And then I showed it to a couple of my family members who were, born 15, 20 years ago, and they could not. They just absolutely could not make sense of the graphic design, the pictures that were being used within the encyclopedia, because it's so 80s, so late 80s, so early 90s, that they just couldn't pick up what it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the job of the graphic designer, is meaning making through images and type. And if whether, like I said, whether you're selling something or whether you're telling a story, that's your primary focus. That's why you learn the discipline of graphic design. Now, sequential art is a subset of graphic design. Graphic design is actually the top category. The subcategory is sequential art, right? Sequential art does not live above graphic design. So what happened was, people like Liefeld or what have you, they basically went a little too abstract and a little too kind of crazy, and the meaning that they were trying to make really didn't play for the reader. They got a lot of cool images, and there's another sort of motivating factor for that. You may have heard this, but a lot of the image guys started to figure out that if they did a page that had the main character, like, if they were doing Spider-Man, if they had Spider-Man as like a splash page, or if they had Spider-Man, just like this here, we've got Rachel taking up a good portion of the page, about a third of the page, if not maybe a little bit more. That page, if Rachel was like the character in this, thing, that page would actually sell for a lot more, because it's a featured character. Whenever you're buying original artwork and you look at a page that doesn't have the main character, so like, let's say there's a Spider-Man page, and instead it's like got the villain, or it's just basically setting up like the scene of New York or whatever, and Spider-Man's nowhere to be found quite yet. Like, they're just sort of setting up some sort of mystery, or they're asking a dramatic question before you flip to the next page and see Spider-Man, like, coursing across the sky. That page would never sell as much. And so what the image guys started to do is exploit this, which is really cynical. But they would sacrifice storytelling in order to produce these pages. And you go back and look at some of these pages. Look at how many times they've got the characters breaking out of panel, standing there looking cool, essentially doing nothing but looking cool, which is a nothing pose. When you pose the character, every time you pose the character, you want to give them some sort of action, something that they're doing, thinking. You want to make the reader feel like they're looking at a thinking, breathing, real person. And so, like, standing there looking cool or whatever, that really doesn't do it. All that does is sell the original art for thousands of dollars instead of hundreds of dollars, like the previous page I talked about with the establishing shot and so on.
Yeah,
so that was another problem.
Two things on that. Number one, you can see that bleeding into a lot of what you see today, because you have these posed images that don't have any movement to them, any real story connected to it at all. And you see that throughout a lot of, I think it was, I can't remember who it was that I was talking to as an artist. I had him on my channel. He does, he did Bane with what's his name? The artist that originally did Bane.
Oh, Graham Nolan.
Graham, yes. I was talking to Graham, and he was saying what they're drawing is evergreen art. That's his word for it. It can be placed anywhere. Like, I mean, it's not part of the story. You could place it anywhere in any story, and it will still make sense. And he says that's not a good storytelling. And you see that over and over again within current stuff. But the other thing I was thinking about while you were talking is the best at the story. Let me see. It's a double page spread from Excalibur, where you have Phoenix fighting Galactus, and you see how much work goes into that double page spread. It's the exact opposite of, I want to sell this page, make the character as big as possible, because Megan, who is Phoenix in that time, she's a tiny little subset of this giant panel fighting Galactus, and it was actually one of the pages I tried to recreate when I was trying to learn how to draw when I was a kid. And you'll see, again, the difference within that kind of storytelling and the focus on the story itself within his art, rather than trying to sell the page. That's what I'm thinking about looking at his art here.
Yeah, exactly. I like if you're the writer, especially if you're the writer now, Claremont knows what he's doing, so he's going to give the artist, all these opportunities to take the artist, like for the artist to take their art to like new levels. So he's going to either spitball with the artist and kind of be like, okay, we need like a dramatic thing. What can you do? What are you thinking of? Do you got a set piece? A set piece, of course, is like some kind of like location or what have you. Do you have something in mind? Like the set piece in this case here that you set up for me. When I read the script, immediately I was like, okay, I need to spend some time on this setup here. So this would be considered a set piece right there, which is basically you had, and I think I gave you shit in an email. But it is an opportunity for me to sort of showcase like what I'm capable of doing as an artist, what I'm capable of conceiving. Like you had talked about this old ruined city in the back in this massive chasm, and here the characters are. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving at all, but the characters are there's my pointer. The characters are right here. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. Here they are, right? And we have a word balloon actually coming from them, but they're sort of in this adventure, kind of coming through this gate, as it were, and this like sort of complex bridging system, aqueduct system that's feeding this city with water that's still flowing through. This sort of clock tower kind of thing where time is the most important element in this particular, whatever the civilization used to be, time was the most important element for that civilization, and all that. And then we come up to this area, this set piece, right? Because this set piece gets used throughout the entire story. Or not through the entire story, throughout the climax as we move toward the climax. This is where our Mondrian, the wizard, is doing his dastardly deeds and making the unreal real, in his demonic sort of way. And so when you wrote this in the script, I was like, okay, this is a page that I need to spend some time on. A writer like Claremont is going to do exactly what you did, which is basically provide that opportunity to do something really cool. A page like this still sells, but do you think Liefeld is going to put that kind of effort into something like this? That's not really what he's known for. I don't want to like knock the guy, but it's not what he's known for. It's not what people expect of him. They expect something very different from Liefeld. And so that's not really what he's going to do. And if Chris Claremont was working with Rob, he wouldn't write that either, because he would look at Rob's previous work and figure out, okay, well, what is his strengths and what is his weaknesses? And this goes back to what I was talking about before with Alan Davis, knowing his strengths as he's writing his own scripts for his own pages. He draws them. Well, what is he going to do? He's going to focus on personality. He's going to focus on character. That's really where his strength lies.
I couldn't agree more. And I actually think that is probably the crux of the downfall of Marvel in the 90s, was when you had these new artists thinking that they could be storytellers at the same time, when the real thing that they were brought in for was for their art, and they just didn't understand the storytelling aspect well enough, especially after following up someone like Claremont.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this was somebody who was excited about comics, understood comics, had been working with artists forever, and worked with them, talked with them on the phone, because he would constantly be on the phone with the artists, asking them like, what do you want to draw? What is it you want to see? Yeah, so again, a page like this it would sell. The thing is that is the writer providing the opportunity for an artist to do pages like this so that they could sell. And sometimes writers were quite, I guess you could say, sympathetic to artists, understanding that their income, is quite important to them. And if the writer could actually give them a page where the artist could sense, hey, if I do this page justice, I could sell it in the aftermarket. Like I could sell the original artwork. That would mean for the writer that artist would put in all this effort into their script, into their story, because they wrote such a script that it inspired them to actually do that. Whether it was the inspiration was money or whether it was something else, it didn't really matter. You got a better page. But yeah, so you can see here, again, flat panels, straight, but watch what happens when we introduce this. And this is a climactic scene, and this gets really crazy. A lot is going on here. And this is one of the other skills of like someone like Alan or John Byrne or whatever, multiple characters on a page and handling it like a boss. Watch how crazy some of this gets.
It makes me think of the original, because the original story for Legion was done by Alan Davis, and he got to play around with so many psychedelic ways of twisting the panels because that's Legion's character. So, go back to even his early stuff. He was playing with these concepts in a masterful way.
Mm-hmm. Let's drink that in. Like it's really incredible. Look at it. He's really skewing these panels now because everything's coming to this moment.
And again, I think that in writing with Chris Claremont, especially doing the early stuff, which is the early Captain Britain stuff, with its warp bending reality, all that kind of stuff, it is part and parcel of what he did from almost day one as a professional artist for Marvel.
And then once this moment goes blink out, we're into he takes it like and you got to think in conceptually here is that he goes to this such a skewed to the point where there's these acute corners of these panels. They're being so skewed. They're so squished, skewed, and then off kilter. And then he's stacking them, and they're just like time is overlapping. Everything's happening simultaneously so fast. He gets to this point. He's building, and then suddenly, boom! He hits this, and that last panel shatters. And what we have is this calm. A moment of silence.
He did the exact same thing within, I think it was one of the annuals for the X-Men, where Wolverine actually gets killed. Excuse me. And a drop of his blood lands on basically a mystical stone, which regenerates him. It's that drop of blood, same as the blinking out within this scene. So, he does this, and as I said, the point is that he's used to these monumental powers within his stories. It's much more, your head in the clouds rather than your down to earth, Spider-Man type story or things like that he's always been used to and that he plays with.
Yeah. And then so everything's back to normal. Everything's calm. Anytime you're doing something calm, you want stability. And the reason how you achieve stability is through a landscape. Instead of a portrait, which is vertical, you actually create the landscape. And that's the proper use of a wide panel, is that you're trying to give or connote this sort of feeling of safety, of calm, of refuge, and so on. Also an establishing shot, benefits tremendously from depending on the establishing shot, but, a wide. But too often we're seeing artists trying to make storyboards of a comic book. And it can be an interesting effect, but really that's not taking advantage of the medium of comics. comics has the vertical panel as much as it has the horizontal panel. So, trying to force, you'll see sometimes, I remember, was it McNiven or something like that? There was an issue of something, I can't remember what it was. And he essentially did every single panel wide like this, right across the entire page. Sometimes there'd be 3 panels, sometimes there'd be 5, sometimes there'd be 4, whatever it was. But it really wasn't a comic book for me at that point. It was just a storyboard. And because I came from animation, I knew what a storyboard looked like. It didn't feel, because I was in animation, I felt I was so sensitive to this. I was like, this isn't, I don't like this. I don't mind, like, wide panels are great. They have their use, but to use them like that, as I said, it just betrays the medium as far as I'm concerned.
What's your take on, let's say, Keith Giffen's Legion of Superheroes 9-panel layout, where he did, issue after issue after issue, every page, 9 panels?
There is something to be said for that. There are different, okay, as an artist, there are different problems to solve. As a reader, it forces you to focus on something specific. The panels are no longer, the panel shapes are no longer I'm phrasing that wrong. The panel shapes are they're dictating something very specific, and you need to be a very skilled artist and writer to be able to accomplish that. It's a very disciplined thing. Now, for the reader, if it's done well, it can be quite effective. Now, all that said, this goes to one of the things that I was going to do here was I was actually going to battle you and John. John's not on here, but I was going to battle you and John about, Jack Kirby sucks. I'm kidding. He doesn't suck. But I wanted to push back because you guys are always talking about how incredible Jack Kirby is. And, I agree. But I got to ask you a question. If I drew like Jack Kirby, do you think I would get hired?
I don't know the answer to that question because Jack Kirby is, excuse me, Jack Kirby is original because his art is developed not from a school, but from his own take on how he saw things. He never had any professional, as far as I know, help in developing his style, and his anatomy is not correct, and he admits his anatomy is not correct. So the whole thing is stylized from the very beginning of how he learned how to draw. So again, that doesn't translate to any other person, if you ask me, because unless you're saying that you had your own style and developed your own style the same way as Jack Kirby, perhaps. But if you're drawing like Jack Kirby as an almost imitation of it, no, it wouldn't work. Just because, again, the whole point is that the entire thing is stylized right down to the fact that his anatomy is incorrect, and only he was able to pull that off. That would be my take on it.
The things that you're saying are definitely true. And the idea that this man's style, this artist's style, was unique to him is also true, and therefore he's a standout is basically what you're saying, and I agree with that. He being a standout. There are a few issues that I have with Kirby, and there are things that I love about him. But one of the things about Kirby is, and by all means, anyone in the chat can push back. You can push back. This is a conversation. I love these kind of conversations. I have these conversations with artists all the time. But Kirby's style sometimes overpowers the story. His style overpowers the story. Now, some people will be like, what are you talking about? His style is the story. His style is the thing that really pushes the stories. There's no action that nobody can draw action like Kirby can. Nobody. I get it. But when everything is dialed to 11, which is largely what Kirby's doing. You're not going to get the quiet moments that play like an Alan Davis. Kirby limited himself. And why? Because he was producing anywhere between 5 to 7 pages a day. And so what he had to do is he had to simplify to a point where everything was, yes, dynamic, but dynamic for what's sake. Action, agreed. But what about the other moments? Did they play as well as, we've been picking on, picking out Alan Davis here, but did those moments play as well? Now, as a kid, you're not really sophisticated when it comes to, gesture, body language, facial expressions, just social cues in general. These sort of things aren't necessarily what you're tapped into when you're reading a Jack Kirby comic. So for a kid, who the heck cares? Kirby jumps off the page, and that's what I care about. That's awesome. I get it. We love Jack Kirby. This isn't a slight against Kirby at all. But you have to ask, what are the limitations of any artist's style? Because every artist has a style, and style is a distillation. It is a limiting factor necessarily. Unless you're doing like a photographic replica, which again is in and of itself a whole other conversation of limiting factors. But putting that aside, unless you're doing some sort of hyperrealism, it's a distillation. It's a simplification, and each artist simplifies a little differently than the other. And so this is where you get like Mignola. You're not going to get facial expressions from Mignola. If you are, they're going to be the most extreme ones with giant, like wide eyes as he's surprised that this, huge, tentacle has just crashed right beside him, busting rocks, and he just barely missed it. And his eyes are wide. That's it. That's the expression that you're going to get. You're not going to get the expression that he did in Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, written by Chaykin and illustrated by Mignola. Mignola was doing more expressive stuff at that time with his style. And so this is where it's like these conversations among artists happen, and we discuss the limitations of various styles. And sometimes it's as obvious as like Mignola's expressiveness, let's say, in his characters' faces and so on. But sometimes it's not as obvious. Sometimes it's like certain artists simply can't achieve the kind of mood that you need because their style betrays it. Like, let's say a very cartoony style, like J. Scott Campbell, and let's say like Danger, when he was on Danger Girl. Could you get horror? Not really, because the style by design is not asking you to take anything really seriously. By design, it's saying, don't take anything we're presenting to you too seriously. We're here to have fun. That's what the style has been designed to do. So
that's
you
an interesting way to put it. I just want to interject there for a second, but before I do that, I just want to say thank you very much to Taz for the £5 super chat. Thank you very much, Taz. Glad to have you here. But I was going to say that for Kirby, that would explain to me what you've just said, the difference between how I think his stuff works in something like OMAC, but doesn't work with Devil Dinosaur. It's because his blocky style for OMAC, it's a lot of technology and it's a lot of backdrop that you can understand with the technological and of today. But if you take it back to a primordial dinosaur place, it doesn't work. And I never liked Devil Dinosaur, his run on Devil Dinosaur, even though I own the entire thing. It was something that didn't feel right, either for his style or for the storytelling.
And this is where an editor, if they were a good editor and they had, clout or weight or experience or, wouldn't have allowed Kirby to do that. Even if it was something that Kirby absolutely wanted to do, he'd be like, no, we need to put you on something else, because there's something that Jack Kirby does better than anybody else. There's something that J. Scott Campbell does better than anybody else. Sometimes artists refer to this as being a victim of your own style. So basically, the meaning behind that is that even though you want to do that one story, you're really not the artist to do it. Nobody will buy it. Nobody will can get into it the way that the story requires. And you really have to be sensitive to that sort of thing. And this comes back to what is a good art director and what is a good editor. A good editor and a good art director are people who understand categories. You, of course, have tremendous respect for categories. Categories exist within all of our media, all of our story and narratives, all of our mythology, all of our history, all of our theology. Categories are the most critical component to understanding our world. Without them, there is no understanding, there is no meaning making. So the moment that you insert someone into a particular category, that is to say something like a farce or a horror or a mystery or any of these categories, immediately evokes demands, certain demands, expectations. Some people refer to them as cliches or tropes or whatever, but that's the language of that category. That's the grammar of that category. Now, can Jack Kirby draw, in a category that's not necessarily his? Sure, but does it play? That's the question. We've all seen actors. We understand this when it comes to actors. Actors, when they're not cast properly, we feel it. And when they're cast brilliantly, we buy it. And so you have to cast your artist for the story. You have to look at the artist, and we know this intrinsically, but we don't necessarily know it when we look at our most favorite artists. We just think they can do anything, and they really can't. They really are kind of, they fit within a certain category, and maybe the Venn diagram crosses over a little bit, but ultimately, in the end, that artist should be given a script that elevates, that shows the features. That's the word I'm looking for. It features their strengths, and so that the story can be told as best as it possibly can. Does that make sense?
It reminds me of an interview that Frank Miller did when he talked about originally getting into drawing, and he would take his stuff to Neil Adams. And he basically went up to New York every weekend he could and would give his rough drawings to Neil Adams, and Neil Adams would sit there and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You don't work here, you don't work here, because he was trying to be a copy of Neil Adams, and he couldn't do it. And he, like Kirby, admits that he doesn't get anatomy correct, and he never could get his anatomy correct. So he had to adjust his style. And I think really within the Daredevil run, you see exactly what he's doing. He had to adjust his style to a dark tone in order to hide the flaws within everything that Neil Adams taught him that he couldn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Artists, just like writers start to learn kind of their voice. An artist also has a voice. It just happens to be visual, and the grammar happens to be visual, and the language happens to be visual. It's sort of the same kind of thing. A writer who may want to write fantasy or whatever ultimately finds out that what they're really good at is, writing noir mystery or something like that. You should play to your strengths. It's tough because artists, writers, we want to think that we can write or draw anything. And, we can, sure. But is it really featuring this goes to Worldview, and this goes to, which is a whole topic. The Cole's notes is this: most people don't even understand the worldview in which they operate.
Agreed.
So they're just a potpourri of this. Oh, I like a little bit of Buddhism. I like a little bit of Gnostic. They don't even realize it's Gnostic. A little pagan, a little this, a little that, and they just sort of mash it together in this potpourri worldview thing. And what they don't realize is this hodgepodge creates a host of contradictions that makes their art nonsensical. And moreover, because they don't understand their own worldview, they can't possibly understand the worldview of other characters. That is to say, the characters that they're writing each has their own unique worldview, which means from that place, they're going to see the exact same phenomena and read it differently. Each character will read it differently from their point of view. Their point of view isn't just where they stand, but their point of view is also what their worldview is. One person's going to see that as, oh, it's a conspiracy. Another person's going to be like, it's no conspiracy. It's just people are idiots, And another person's going to see it as, oh, it's not a conspiracy. It's not idiots. It's karma or whatever. It's the same phenomena. It was Joss Whedon who said it's Firefly is about 9 different people looking into the blackness of space and seeing 9 different things. And so one of the biggest problems is worldview. And you don't realize, unless you interrogate, yourself, your beliefs, how you came to believe what you believe, and actually look at the various worldviews that are out there and test them against, one of our sort of things, which is logic and reason, borrowed, of course, from, ancients. But unless you do that, you're not going to understand your worldview. And if you don't understand your worldview, you can't understand your character's worldview and how and why they see things differently. And without that, you're not going to put together like proper conflict between the characters. And without that proper conflict, the stakes can never get risen above a certain kind of noise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It reminds me of a meeting I had with an old professor I had once where I was doing an honors in, we were deconstructing one of Plato's dialogues for, this is my honors class. But the professor talked about the fact that the continuity of ideas was the real nub of what he was trying to get across. And he said there's too many people in his classes that, because they don't have enough of an understanding of their own worldview and their ability to analyze things according to their own way of a calculated way of looking at the world. It's like he said, when I give them ideas, it's like shooting bullets into space. You'll never know if it's ever going to hit anything, because they can, it could be just blankness. It could be everything shifting around so that the target moves, it's this kind of thing. And it really boils down to even the understanding of ideas. So I know exactly what you're trying to say here. And it's one of the things, like I try to employ that within the Valiant Heroes, because we have 5 characters now. We used to have 6. One of them died within the last issue, but they come at a lot of what is going on. And because I'm so action driven with those stories, that the way each of them wants to approach the action is part of the action itself, because there's conflict within those characters. So yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I think it is essential.
I really like that metaphor of the bullets, of firing you into space, because I sympathize. I've put out a few ideas to some of my peers, and I hopefully we're beyond a certain level of arrogance here. This isn't about arrogance necessarily. I think it's just about priorities, and perhaps I prioritize certain things more than others. But the priority here, the thing that I've prioritized, is worldview and trying to get a sort of a, as you said, continuity to your understanding. Where do you place theology, if you even have one, versus where do you place philosophy, versus where you place science and psychology and everything else. Each of these categories, where do they fit in your worldview, and in what order? If you're not asking these questions, those bullets that are getting fired into space, the job of you, if bullets are fired at you, ideas and so on, is that you're supposed to catch them, and you're supposed to be able to put them in the various places, the categories that they belong, in order for meaning making to happen. Most people hear the idea, and at best they're like, that's really cool, but they can't do anything with the idea because they have no idea where to place or put it. They have no idea how to take that idea and either exploit it, play with it, use it in some fashion that's beneficial to themselves, to their family, or mankind, or what have you. So this goes to story making. This goes to art. If you don't have a worldview, you can't even look at your page and start laying the page out. In my opinion, you can't even lay the page out from the first panel, from a blank page, because if you start to, you're going to be emulating somebody else. You're not actually going back to the fundamentals and understanding that this picture plane has certain rules. You know, the first rule of the picture plane, not to get too deep into this, esoteric stuff, but the first, obvious rule of the picture plane is that it is. Imagine that the page is one panel. Let's just pretend that this is just a splash page. The frame isn't just telling you the story of what's happening in the picture or in the frame, but it's as important as what is excluded outside of the frame. And so you as an artist aren't just drawing the thing that's in the picture plane, but you're deciding what is not essential, what should be excluded from this picture plane. That in and of itself is a fundamental that a lot of people, artists, don't necessarily get, and they try to cram everything in there, and it's not necessary.
It's actually one of the things that Marvel tries to do now. I covered podcasts where they were talking about panel design. This was probably about 3 years ago. And they were talking about how to shove as much as possible in the background to give the reader some idea of the backstory of the character. And I'm thinking to myself, no, that's a cluttered panel. That's not how you tell a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But absolutely. And as I said, we can move on to the next topic, but worldview really is an important component for an artist. And without worldview and without some sort of rigor by which they take their logic and reason and are able to, as I said it before, interrogate their worldview, understand where they're coming from, actually settle upon a worldview that they, believe. I have a particular worldview, probably very similar to yours. Without that, you're going to have a hard time knowing which way's up, which way's down, right, left, all the real fundamental stuff. You're going to have a hard time with. And whenever something confusing comes your way, a lot of the times it's confusing because your worldview is malformed.
Well, I hate to put an end to this discussion because I think we're just getting going here, Nick. But I really have to get going. We've done our hour, and I want to thank everybody for showing up for this impromptu comic book team up with me and Nick, because John, I'm sure, is having a lot of fun over at Cecil's channel. So you have to excuse him for the night. I want to thank everyone. I would love to keep going, Michael, but I just can't. I have other obligations to get to right at the moment. But thank you very much, everyone, and thank you very much, Nick, for everything you shared with us tonight.
Yeah, it's great. Love it. I love talking about this stuff.
All right. I am just going to say goodnight, and we're not going to end on my normal trailer for Crom the Destroyer. I'm just going to end the stream, and I want to say goodnight to everyone, and thank you very much for showing up for the stream. Thank you, Nick.
Bye. Bye, everyone.